In the modern world, chaos isn't always loud. It doesn't always come in the form of riots or wars. More often, it's subtle. It's the quiet unraveling of meaning. It's the internal confusion that sets in when people are told that there is no truth, only perspectives, no objective right or wrong, only what feels good at the time. This is the age of moral relativism, where the compass spins and no one can tell which direction is forward. In such a time, the human soul grows weary. The burden of deciding everything, what to believe, how to live, what is right, what is sacred, becomes crushing, and it's precisely here that Islam speaks with an almost shocking clarity. Islam offers something rare in our age, structure, not just a list of rules, but a holistic framework, a blueprint for living that stretches across every facet of life. It doesn't say, do what you want. It says, do what is right, whether you want to or not. That alone is revolutionary in a culture that prizes personal freedom above all else, often at the cost of discipline, responsibility, and even sanity. And that structure begins with something simple but powerful: submission, not in the sense of defeat, but in the sense of aligning oneself with something greater than the ego. 5 times a day, the Muslim is called to prayer, not when it's convenient, not when it feels good, but consistently, rhythmically, like the beating of the heart. That alone is a defiance of the chaos of modern time, where the hours blur together and days slip away without meaning. Prayer interrupts the drift. It demands presence. It builds the muscle of discipline in a world addicted to distraction. It tells the soul, you are not at the center of the universe. Stand, bow, prostrate, remember. This kind of structure isn't oppressive. It's liberating, because when you surrender to a divine order, you are no longer a slave to every impulse or trend. You don't have to invent yourself from scratch every morning. Islam gives you a place to stand. It gives you a role, a code, and a community. It says, you were created with purpose. Your life matters, not because of how many followers you have or how much you produce, but because you are accountable to the Creator of the heavens and the earth. That accountability is not just a burden, it's a compass. And a compass is exactly what people are looking for when they say they feel lost. The structure of Islam extends beyond prayer. It encompasses everything: how to eat, how to treat others, how to conduct business, how to marry, how to bury the dead. To the modern ear, this might sound like overreach, but to someone drowning in uncertainty, it feels like rescue. There's a strange comfort in knowing that every part of life has guidance, that you're not left to figure everything out alone, that you are held, not tightly, not tyrannically, but firmly, like a hand on your shoulder saying, stay steady. And this structure doesn't flatten individuality, it refines it. The self in Islam is not denied but disciplined. You are not told to erase your desires, but to govern them. You're not taught to suppress ambition, but to align it with service, virtue, and legacy. This is a far cry from the chaos of consumerism and individualism that says, you are your desires, and then leaves people shattered when those desires betray them. It's no coincidence that many who turn to Islam describe a kind of internal quiet they've never felt before. Not a silence of emptiness, but of alignment. When you know where you stand in relation to God, to the world, and to yourself, you can breathe deeper. You can move with confidence. You are no longer grasping at straws of identity or chasing approval from 1,000 voices. You submit to one, and from that submission, paradoxically, comes strength. Structure in this sense is not confinement, it's scaffolding. It helps build you into something more stable, more grounded. And when the winds of life come, and they will come, you don't fall apart, you bend, but you don't break, because your roots are deep and your frame is built on truth. That is what Islam offers, a structure strong enough to carry a soul in an age that tells you to drift beneath all the noise of modern life, beneath the scrolling, the streaming, the endless pursuit of novelty. There's a quieter, more ancient hunger. It doesn't shout, it lingers, it tugs at the edges of consciousness in the moments of stillness, when the entertainment fades and the mask slips. It is the hunger for meaning, and it is everywhere. In boardrooms and bedrooms, in classrooms and crowded streets, people are not just asking how to live. They are asking why. Why does any of this matter? What is this all for? Modernity has tried to answer that question in countless ways. It has promised meaning through career success, through the accumulation of wealth, through self-expression, through pleasure, and yet, the deeper the world plunges into these pursuits, the more hollow it often feels. Depression, anxiety, addiction, these are not just medical conditions. In many cases, they are symptoms of disconnection, of a soul starved for purpose. When meaning collapses, the human being collapses with it. Because without meaning, even comfort becomes unbearable. Without meaning, suffering becomes intolerable. And without meaning, identity becomes fragmented, reduced to performance, image, and constant reinvention. In this state of existential fatigue, people begin searching, not casually, but desperately. They may not say it aloud, but they're looking for something real, something deeper than the temporary fixes offered by consumer culture. And this is where Islam enters, not as a trend, not as a fashion, but as a response to the human condition. It does not offer the sugar high of instant gratification. It offers meaning rooted in transcendence. It calls the human being not to invent meaning, but to discover it, to uncover a truth that was always there, embedded in the soul. At the heart of Islam is the idea that you were created on purpose, by a creator who knows you, sees you, and calls you to live with intention. That your life is not random, that your suffering is not meaningless, that your heart's yearning is not a malfunction but a signal. This is not abstract philosophy. It's a world view that speaks directly to the human core. And it resonates often deeply, especially with those who have exhausted the empty promises of modern life. People are drawn to Islam not just because it provides answers, but because it asks the right question. Who are you? Why are you here? What happens after you die? What does it mean to be good, to be noble, to be human? These aren't questions of mere curiosity. They are survival questions, and Islam refuses to water them down. It treats the seeker with seriousness. It says, "Come as you are, but do not stay as you are. Transform, grow. Submit not to your whims, but to the one who made you." The yearning for meaning is often tied to the longing for coherence. We want our lives to make sense, not just emotionally, but morally. We want our actions to matter, our sacrifices to be seen, our struggles to serve a purpose. Islam offers this coherence through the belief in divine wisdom, divine justice, and divine presence. Every act, no matter how small, can carry eternal weight if done with intention and sincerity. Washing your hands before prayer, feeding a neighbor, smiling at a stranger. These are not just good deeds. They are spiritual affirmations. They are part of a story much larger than the self, and that is perhaps the most powerful aspect of meaning in Islam. It places the individual within a greater narrative. You are not just floating through space, reacting to the moment. You are on a path. You are in motion. You have duties, trials, and moments of divine encounter. Life becomes sacred, not in some abstract poetic sense, but practically, visibly, daily. This transforms everything. Pain becomes a test. Joy becomes gratitude. Wealth becomes responsibility. Death becomes a transition, not a tragedy. Meaning is not a luxury in this world. It is embedded into the very architecture of existence. This is what people are finding when they turn toward Islam. Not just a religion, but a lifeline. a restoration of depth in a world obsessed with surface, a return to soul in a culture that celebrates the ego. They are not just converting out of curiosity, they are returning to something they feel they always knew but could never name, a sense that life is sacred, that truth is knowable, and that within the chaos of the world there is a divine order waiting to be lived. Not just believed, but embodied, there is a truth that modern culture often avoids, a truth that feels heavy, even intimidating, but also deeply necessary. It is the idea that we are not our own ultimate authority, that beyond society, beyond law, beyond even our personal conscience, there is something higher to whom we are accountable. This notion, ancient and enduring, is at the heart of Islam, accountability to the divine. In a world that has elevated personal autonomy above all else, the idea of divine accountability feels almost radical. We are taught from a young age to follow our heart, to be true to ourselves, as if the self were infallible, as if our emotions were sacred scripture. But the self is not always wise. Desire can mislead, pride can distort, and without a higher standard, without something or someone to answer to, we are left to drift, measuring right and wrong by what feels convenient in the moment. That kind of freedom often becomes its own form of prison. Islam offers a striking alternative. It says, you are free, yes, but not absolutely. Your freedom is framed by responsibility, and that responsibility is rooted in the fact that your Creator is aware of you. Not just in public, not just when you succeed, but in secret, in your intentions, your thoughts, your private moments of struggle. That awareness is not surveillance, it is presence. It is a constant invitation to rise to your best self, even when no one else is watching. There's something profoundly human about this kind of accountability, because when we are only accountable to each other, it's easy to perform. It's easy to act moral while hiding corruption. But when you believe you are accountable to the one who sees beyond the surface, hypocrisy becomes hollow. You can't fake virtue before God, and that strips away the mask. It forces honesty. It calls you to integrity, not just in action, but in being. Accountability to the divine also reshapes how one views power. In a godless framework, power often becomes the highest aim. If no one is above you, then domination makes sense. But if there is a power above all powers, then humility becomes essential. No matter how much status you attain, you remain a servant. No matter how much wealth you gather, you cannot buy your way out of death. Islam reminds the human being, you are significant, but you are not sovereign, and that's not an insult. It's a liberation, because the weight of playing God was never meant for human shoulders. With divine accountability comes a unique kind of justice. Islam teaches that nothing is truly lost. No act of kindness goes unnoticed. No injustice will be ignored. In this life, systems can fail. The guilty walk free. The innocent suffer. But when you believe in divine accountability, you live with the certainty that the story is not over, that everything will be weighed, not by corrupt judges or flawed institutions, but by the one who knows all and forgets nothing. This brings peace to the wounded and a warning to the wicked. It reestablishes moral order in a world that so often feels upside down. It also makes moral development deeply personal. In Islam, repentance is not a public spectacle. It's a private reckoning. It's a conversation with the divine, unfiltered and raw. You admit, you ask, you realign, and in that moment you are not condemned. You are called higher. This is not the shame of being judged by others. It's the sacred discomfort of realizing you can do better because you were made for better. Divine accountability doesn't crush you, it shapes you. It turns guilt into growth, failure into fuel, and perhaps most powerfully, this accountability breeds resilience. Because when your standard is divine, you stop playing to the crowd. You are no longer dependent on the approval of people whose values shift with the wind. You live with inner clarity. You endure hardship with purpose. You resist temptation with strength drawn from something beyond the ego. You stand not because it's easy, but because you know you will answer to the one who sees your effort, even if no one else does. To believe you are seen by God is to believe your life matters, not abstractly, but deeply, intimately. Your words matter, your choices matter, your heart matters, and in a culture that often treats people as replaceable, that kind of affirmation is revolutionary. Divine accountability is not just a theological concept. It is a psychological anchor. It grounds the soul. It redirects the will. It reminds us that life is not a game to be won, but a trust to be fulfilled. We tend to think of transformation as something dramatic, an epiphany, a sudden awakening, a life-altering moment. But real change, the kind that reshapes a person from the inside out, rarely comes in flashes of brilliance. It is forged slowly, steadily, through repetition, through discipline, through habits, and this is where the genius of Islam becomes clear. Because it doesn't just offer beliefs, it offers practices, daily, consistent, structured acts that form the very architecture of character. Islam doesn't expect you to become virtuous by accident. It provides a system designed to mold the human being. Not just spiritually, but psychologically, emotionally, socially. It begins with the most elemental of actions, the daily prayer. 5 times a day, no matter what is happening in your life, no matter your mood, your success or failure, you stop. You disconnect from the chaos, from ego, from worldly attachments, and you turn your body, your voice, your focus toward your Creator. You engage in a series of deliberate movements, standing, bowing, prostrating, sitting, and with every movement, you're reminded of your place in the world. That you're not at the center of it, that humility is not weakness, that stillness is strength. This daily rhythm becomes more than routine. It becomes a reorientation of the self, a way to cut through distraction and reestablish clarity. And over time, it builds a kind of internal muscle. Discipline is no longer something you have to force. It becomes who you are. The person who rises before dawn to pray is not just performing a ritual. They're becoming someone who does hard things on purpose, who puts truth before comfort, who trains the will to serve something higher than impulse, and it's not just prayer. Fasting, for example, isn't just about abstaining from food. It's about mastering the self. For an entire month each year, Muslims are called to withhold not only from food and drink, but from anger, gossip, indulgence, and laziness, from all the habits that corrode the soul. This is not deprivation for the sake of suffering. It's refinement. It's a deliberate stripping away of excess so that what remains is essential, grounded, real. The act of fasting teaches restraint, patience, empathy for the hungry and the poor. It teaches you to endure discomfort with grace, and it shows you in a direct and visceral way that you are not a slave to your appetites. Then there's charity, not occasional generosity, but obligatory giving. Not just when you're feeling inspired, but as a structured duty. Islam builds into the financial life of every believer the act of zakat, a portion of one's wealth given annually to those in need. This isn't symbolic. It's concrete. It forces you to confront your relationship with wealth, to ask regularly, is this money purifying me or corrupting me? Am I hoarding or serving? That simple act reshapes your worldview. It breaks the back of greed. It reminds you that what you own is not really yours. It's a trust. Even the seemingly small details, the way one enters a room, the manners of speech, how one eats, how one treats others, are touched by Islamic guidance. These are not random rules. They are tools. Each action becomes an opportunity for intention, for presence, for gratitude, and the more you practice this way of living, the more your inner world shifts. You become someone who moves through life with deliberateness, with dignity, with consciousness. Character is not built in theory, it's built in repetition, in the choices you make when no one is watching, in the small victories over laziness, over arrogance, over desire. Islam understands this at a profound level. It doesn't just tell you to be good, it gives you the daily tools to become good, and that process, over days and years, forges something unshakable. A character that doesn't depend on moods or trends, a self that isn't at the mercy of external validation, a heart that stays firm in the storm. These daily practices are not limitations, they are scaffolding. They hold you up when life presses down. They train the soul for resilience, for gratitude, for purpose. They create a rhythm in a world of noise, and in that rhythm, the human being finds a kind of alignment that is rare and powerful. A life lived not just with faith, but with form. Not just belief, but becoming nihilism doesn't announce itself with a name tag. It doesn't come storming through the door with a banner that reads "Nothing matters." Instead, it creeps in quietly. It settles into minds that have been told there is no grand design, that the universe is cold and indifferent, that human life is a cosmic accident. It seeps into the soul when truth is treated as subjective, when morality becomes negotiable, and when meaning is reduced to preference. It manifests not just in philosophy lectures, but in the deep discontent of the average person who wonders why they feel so empty despite having everything. Nihilism, in essence, is the belief that life has no inherent value, no objective purpose. And in our modern world, it's not just a theory, it's a condition. And this is precisely why Islam resonates so powerfully in our time, because it doesn't just argue against nihilism, it replaces it. It offers a complete counter-narrative, one rooted in purpose, in design, in accountability, in transcendence. It declares unambiguously that human life is not an accident, that you were made intentionally by a creator who is not distant or silent, but deeply involved. A creator who knows you, who honors your struggle, who sets the parameters of truth, not arbitrarily, but with wisdom. This is not the cold silence of the void, it is the warmth of revelation. Islam does not ask the human being to invent meaning. It reveals meaning. It tells you your life is sacred, your actions echo in eternity, your suffering has context, your death is not the end. That narrative alone is powerful enough to pull someone back from the edge of despair. Because if nothing matters, then no amount of pleasure can save you. But if everything has meaning, even the difficult things, then even pain becomes bearable. Even loss becomes a chapter, not a collapse. One of the most defining features of Islam is its unapologetic clarity. It does not waver on its claims. There is one God. He created the universe. He revealed guidance. You are here to serve, to grow, to be tested, and ultimately to return. In a world where people are drowning in uncertainty, that kind of clarity is oxygen. It cuts through the fog. It offers not just beliefs, but orientation, not just ideas, but direction. The nihilistic world, you leaves people spinning. If truth is just a social construct, if morality is just a product of evolution, if love is just chemistry, then the deepest parts of our humanity are reduced to illusions. Islam refuses to accept that. It affirms that truth exists, that justice is real, that mercy, compassion, sacrifice, dignity, these are not evolutionary tricks. They are divine values woven into the fabric of reality by the one who made it. Nihilism tends to lead either to hedonism or despair. Some try to fill the void with distractions, endless entertainment, substances, relationships, status. Others fall into apathy or even existential depression. Islam disrupts both paths. It calls the human being to rise above momentary pleasure, to live for something bigger. It doesn't deny that life is difficult. In fact, it acknowledges suffering as a central part of the human journey. But it gives that suffering weight. It says your trials are not random. They are seen, measured, and rewarded. This is what draws so many, especially in times of personal crisis or existential confusion. Islam offers not only spiritual comfort but intellectual coherence. Its claims are not abstract sentiments, they are rooted in a deep metaphysical framework. There is a creator, there is purpose, there is an afterlife. Every choice matters, and the human heart, even when buried under layers of cynicism, often knows this. It senses that meaning must be more than what we invent. That truth must be more than what we feel. Islam speaks directly to that knowing, and it's not just theory, it's practice. The daily rituals, the acts of worship, the moral discipline, they all work together to reorient a person, to anchor the soul in something stable. Islam is not merely a set of beliefs, it's a way of being, a way that pushes back against the drift of meaninglessness, that counters the scream of nihilism with the calm certainty of purpose. In a time when many are wandering, not just physically but existentially, Islam stands as a map. And not a vague, choose-your-own adventure guide, but a precise, deeply rooted, time-tested path, one that has carried millions through war, peace, hardship, and triumph, a path that doesn't erase doubt, but gives it a place within faith. The path that speaks not just to the mind, but to the aching heart that still dares to ask, why am I here? Something deep is unraveling in the heart of modern culture. On the surface, everything appears functional. Technology advances, cities expand, entertainment flourishes. But beneath the surface, something essential is eroding. The shared moral code that once held communities together is now contested ground. The traditions that gave people identity are dismissed as outdated. The virtues that built civilizations, discipline, humility, courage, restraint, are being replaced with indulgence, vanity, and apathy. This is cultural decay, not dramatic or explosive at first, but slow, corrosive, and widespread. And paradoxically, it is this very decay that has become a catalyst for the rise and return of something far older, more rooted, and far more demanding, Islam. As modern societies celebrate the breakdown of boundaries in the name of progress, many are beginning to feel the consequences: disorientation, isolation, fragmentation of the self. What was once considered sacred is now optional. What was once shameful is now entertainment. People are told that they can be whoever they want, believe whatever they want, and pursue whatever they desire, without limit, but this endless freedom often becomes a burden. When nothing is fixed, when everything is fluid, the soul floats without anchor. The collapse of external order inevitably leads to internal chaos. People are feeling it. They may not always articulate it in religious language, but it shows up in the mental health epidemic, the crisis of identity, the addiction to distraction, the rising tide of loneliness. The cultural scripts offered today are thin. They can't answer the deeper questions, and more importantly, they can't carry the weight of human suffering. When life becomes unbearable, when the storms hit, as they always do, people look for something solid, something that doesn't shift with the trends. That search often leads them to Islam, not because Islam changes with the times, but precisely because it does not. In a world obsessed with reinvention, Islam offers rootedness. While other systems are constantly adapting to popular opinion, Islam holds its line. It doesn't apologize for its values. It doesn't revise its truths to fit the mood of the moment, and for many, especially those disillusioned with the emptiness of modern culture, that kind of stability is deeply attractive. The decay of culture has created a hunger that superficial lifestyles can't satisfy. Materialism promised happiness, but delivered anxiety. Hyper-sexualization promised liberation, but delivered broken relationships and confusion. The pursuit of fame and self-branding offered validation, but left people more insecure than ever. In the middle of all this, Islam steps forward, not with entertainment, but with discipline, not with comfort, but with responsibility, not with distraction, but with clarity. It reminds people that dignity is found not in chasing desire, but in mastering it. That meaning is not invented every morning, but revealed through submission to something higher. That freedom is not the absence of limits, but the ability to live by principle in a world that worships impulse. This is the opposite of decay. It is order, purpose, elevation, and that contrast is powerful. When everything else is falling apart, the thing that stands tall draws attention. For many converts to Islam, their journey doesn't begin with curiosity about doctrine. It begins with dissatisfaction. They sense that something is missing, that the culture around them is collapsing under its own contradictions, that what they were told would fulfill them has only made them more restless, and then they encounter Islam not as a religion of convenience, but of conviction. And it speaks to them in a way that modern culture never could. It challenges them, it holds them to account, it calls them to rise. This is why cultural decay, instead of weakening the presence of religion, has in many cases driven people toward it. Islam doesn't dilute itself to fit into the modern world. It stands firm and invites the world to come to it. In doing so, it offers what the heart was looking for all along: structure in chaos, meaning in pain, truth in confusion, and a God who does not change. The more the surrounding culture collapses into moral ambiguity, spiritual amnesia, and emotional instability, the more Islam appears not as a relic of the past, but as a roadmap for the future, a system tested by time. A world view that doesn't unravel under pressure, a way of life that doesn't just critique the sickness of the age, but offers a cure. There's a quiet unraveling happening in modern society. It isn't always visible on the surface. People still go to work, pay bills, and scroll endlessly through curated feeds, but underneath, there's a growing sense that something essential has been lost. Values that once held communities together have been eroded, first questioned, then mocked, and finally discarded. We've moved from tradition to relativism, from meaning to spectacle, and from discipline to indulgence. What remains is a culture that champions freedom but can't define responsibility, that worships choice but forgets commitment, and that celebrates progress while losing its moral compass. In this landscape, the very chaos that was promised to set people free has become a source of anxiety and confusion. Boundaries have blurred to the point that many can no longer tell right from wrong without consulting the latest trend, the loudest voice, or the strongest emotion. Marriage is increasingly seen as optional, children as burdens, and religion as either superstition or control. Individualism, once heralded as the path to liberation, has morphed into isolation. People have more entertainment, more access, and more stimulation than ever before, yet depression, addiction, and disconnection continue to climb. This is not evolution, it's erosion. And in the midst of this, Islam is rising, not because it is adapting to cultural decay, but because it refuses to. It stands as a structure in a world that's coming apart. It offers a clarity that modernity has traded away. Where society now hesitates to even define what a man is, what a woman is, what a family is, Islam speaks plainly, with confidence born not of arrogance but of timeless rootedness. It doesn't pander to the moment. It offers a framework forged in revelation, grounded in responsibility, and centered around submission, not to the self, not to society, but to the Creator. It's this resistance to moral collapse that makes Islam so compelling. In a world that bends to every new cultural current, Islam holds its shape. Its teachings don't shift with polls or hashtags. They're not designed to flatter the ego. They're meant to refine it. And it's that very demand for discipline, for modesty, for purpose, that call to live with moral weight, that draws people in. Because deep down, many are exhausted by the endless permission to do whatever they want. They are tired of chasing validation through performance, tired of a life where nothing is sacred, where everything is for sale, and where there's no ground to stand on. Cultural decay becomes the very thing that wakes people up. When everything else starts to rot, the soul begins to search, and Islam offers not a patch or a placebo. It offers a new foundation. It doesn't just critique the decay, it offers an alternative, a system where the self is not the highest authority, where pleasure is not the point of life, where family is protected, not deconstructed, where morality is not invented, but revealed. This isn't appealing in spite of its difficulty. It's appealing because of it. People are hungry for challenge, not comfort. They want something that demands something from them, something that pushes them to rise, not sink, something that asks for their discipline, their integrity, their submission, not to the lowest parts of themselves, but to the highest. Islam meets that hunger with a call to order. It asks for your time, your effort, your heart, and it gives back something far more enduring than dopamine or likes or fleeting approval. It gives back coherence, a life that fits, a self that's being shaped, a direction that leads somewhere. The irony is sharp. As the modern world unravels, it's not its flexibility or permissiveness that saves people its structure. It's not more freedom that heals the soul its boundaries, and that is what Islam provides, not arbitrarily, but with deep psychological insight, daily prayer to anchor your day, fasting to teach restraint, charity to purify your wealth, modesty to elevate dignity. These practices aren't random. They're rhythms, and in a culture filled with noise, rhythm restores sanity. So cultural decay, while tragic, becomes fertile ground. It strips away illusions and forces honesty. It reveals that without a higher truth, everything collapses into preference and power, and it makes room for people to finally ask the deeper questions. Who am I serving? What am I living for? Is this all there is? Islam doesn't just answer those questions. It transforms the person who asks them. It offers a path not just out of the decay, but towards something whole, towards submission, structure, and ultimate meaning. And more people are realizing that's exactly what they've been searching for, even if they didn't know it. Even if the culture told them not to so, as the world wrestles with uncertainty, as meaning is stripped from life and replaced with momentary pleasure, as the culture crumbles under the weight of its own contradictions, Islam stands. Not as a trend, not as a reaction, but as a timeless, tested, unshakable way of being. It doesn't beg for acceptance, and it doesn't bend to fit in. It calls people to rise, to remember who they are, to reconnect with what is real. And in that call, millions are finding the very thing modernity could never deliver. Structure in chaos, meaning in suffering, clarity in confusion, and purpose that does not fade with the noise. This is not just a resurgence. It's a return to truth, a return to God, a return to what the human soul was always meant to seek.